Script 2. The Spanish-American War. Although Spain and America had a relatively good relationship, Spain even bringing horses to America, in 1898 Spain and America went to war with each other in what is now known as the Spanish-American War. When he took office, President McKinley urged neutrality in Cuba, but leaned toward the insurgents. Causes of the war included Cuban independence. The main cause of the Spanish-American War was the desire of Cuban rebels to gain independence from Spain. The Cuban rebels had been fighting for independence for several years, and the U.S. had become sympathetic to their cause. The U.S. also had economic interests in Cuba, which made them concerned about the stability of the island. Yellow journalism. Another cause of the war was the sensationalist reporting of events in Cuba by the American press. Yellow journalism played a significant role in swaying public opinion in the United States towards war with Spain. Many newspapers exaggerated or fabricated stories to make Spain look bad and create public outrage. USS Maine. The USS Maine, an American battleship, was sent to Havana Harbor in Cuba to protect American interests. In February 1898, the ship exploded, killing 266 American sailors. Although the cause of the explosion was never definitively determined, many Americans blamed Spain for the incident. The results of the war were Treaty of Paris. The Spanish-American War officially ended with the signing of the Treaty of Paris on December 10, 1898. Spain gave up its claim to Cuba, and the United States acquired Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines. Expansion of American Empire. The war marked the emergence of the United States as a world power, as it gained control over territories outside its own borders. Anti-imperialist movement. The war also sparked an anti-imperialist movement in the United States, with many Americans questioning the morality of acquiring colonies and territories abroad. Impact on Cuba. Although Cuba gained independence, the United States retained significant influence over the country, including the right to intervene in its affairs. This led to tension between the two countries and set the stage for future conflicts. The Depression of 1890s. The Panic and Depression of the 1890s, also known as the Long Depression, was a period of economic downturn that began in the United States in 1893 and lasted until the late 1890s. The causes of this economic crisis were a complex set of economic, social, and political factors that had been building up since the end of the Civil War. But there were several changes in outlook that contributed to it. Here are some of the main changes. Overproduction. One major factor was the overexpansion of railroads and other industries. This caused the United States to experience a period of rapid industrial growth. This led to an overproduction of goods. This overproduction led to a decline in prices, which hurt farmers, who were already facing increased competition from new technologies and foreign imports and other producers. Lack of confidence in the banking system. Many banks and businesses overextended themselves with loans and investments, leading to bank failures and a shortage of credit. This was further compounded by a decrease in demand for American goods abroad due to economic crises in Europe and Asia. Financial speculation. There was also a great deal of speculation in the stock market and real estate during this period. Investors were taking risks with borrowed money, and when the markets began to decline, many people were left with huge debts. Gold standard. The United States was on the gold standard at this time, which meant that the value of the dollar was tied to the value of gold. This made it difficult for the government to respond to the crises by increasing the money supply. International factors. There were also international factors at play, such as a decline in European demand for American goods, which hurt American exports. Government policy. Finally, government policies may have contributed to the crisis. For example, some historians argue that the Sherman Antitrust Act, which was intended to promote competition, actually led to the concentration of economic power in the hands of a few large corporations. These changes in outlook led to a decline in business investing, rising unemployment, and a decrease in consumer spending, which caused the Panic and Depression of the 1890s. The crisis had a profound impact on American society and politics, contributing to the fall of the Populist Party, which collapsed in 1896 after the nomination of Democrat William Jennings. The Populist Party had been doing well and had a nominee, James B. Weaver, run for president in the previous election in 1892. Changes in industrialism. Industrialism underwent significant changes after 1900. driven by a combination of technological advancements, government policies, and social factors. Here are some of the key ways in which industrialism changed after 1900. Technological innovations. The early 1900s saw a wave of technological innovations, including the development of the automobile, the airplane, and the assembly line. These innovations helped to increase productivity and efficiency in manufacturing, leading to lower costs and higher profits. Emergence of corporate capitalism. The late 1800s and early 1900s saw the rise of corporate capitalism, which led to the consolidation of economic power in the hands of a few large corporations. This concentration of power had a profound impact on the way that business was conducted, as well as on the political and social landscape. Growth of labor unions. As industrialism continued to evolve, so did the labor movement. Labor unions grew in strength and numbers, demanding better working conditions and higher wages for workers. Government regulation. In response to growing concerns about the power of corporations and the welfare of workers, the government began to enact a series of regulations aimed at protecting workers and consumers. This included the establishment of minimum wage laws, safety regulations, and antitrust laws. Globalization. The early 1900s also saw the emergence of globalization as businesses expanded into international markets and global trade increased. This led to greater competition and opportunities for growth, but also increased economic instability and inequality. Mass production, which emerged in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, had a significant impact on the lives of women, children, immigrants, and African Americans. Here are some of the ways in which these groups were affected. Women. Mass production led to the creation of many new jobs in factories, which provided opportunities for women to enter the workforce in large numbers. However, these jobs were often low-paying and dangerous, and women were subject to long hours and poor working conditions. Children. Children were also employed in factories during this time, often working long hours in hazardous conditions. Child labor laws were eventually enacted to protect children, but it took many years to enforce these laws. Immigrants. Many immigrants found work in the factories, but they often faced discrimination and poor working conditions. Language barriers and cultural differences made it difficult for them to integrate into American society. This was exacerbated by the Chinese Exclusion Act, passed in 1882, in order to limit the number of Chinese immigrants. This led to a drastic fall of Chinese immigrants. African Americans. Although African Americans were still technically free after the Civil War, they still faced significant discrimination and oppression. Many worked in low-paying jobs in the factories, but they were often excluded from the most skilled and well-paid positions. The industrialization of America in the late 19th and early 20th centuries brought significant changes to the composition of the workforce and the experiences of workers with labor. Prior to industrialization, most Americans worked in agriculture. With the growth of factories, however, more and more people began to work in industry. As factories emerged in urban areas, many people moved from rural areas to cities to find work in the factories. This led to the growth of urban populations and the emergence of new social and economic structures. The rise of factories and mass production also created new types of work, including jobs in manufacturing, transportation, and other industries. These jobs were often dangerous and demanding, requiring long hours and physical labor. In response, workers began to form unions to advocate for better rights and working conditions. This led to strikes, protests, and other forms of labor activism. As labor issues became more pressing, the government began to regulate the labor market, passing laws to protect workers and ensure fair working conditions. These laws included minimum wage laws, safety regulations, and child labor laws. Progressivism. Progressivism was a political movement in the United States from the late 19th century to the earliest 20th century that sought to reform the country in various ways. Here are 6 major characteristics of progressivism. Social justice. Progressives believed in promoting social justice and addressing social problems such as poverty, inequality, and discrimination. Government intervention. Progressives believed that government intervention was necessary to address social and economic problems, and they advocated for expanding the role of government in regulating business, protecting workers' rights, and providing social services due to a concern of the effects of industrialization. Efficiency. Progressives emphasized the need for efficiency in government and industry, promoting the use of scientific management and other techniques to increase productivity and streamline operations. Environmentalism. Progressives were concerned about the impact of industrialization and urbanization on the environment, and they advocated for conservation and the preservation of natural resources. Moral reform. Progressives believed in promoting moral reform, including temperance and the regulation of vice, in order to improve society. Internationalism. Progressives were interested in promoting international cooperation and diplomacy, and they supported initiatives such as the League of Nations and other international organizations to promote peace and prevent war. Progressive reformers attacked a wide range of problems in cities and states during the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Here are some of the major ways in which they sought to address these problems. Municipal corruption. One of the major problems that progressive reformers sought to address was corruption in municipal governments. They believed that many city officials were corrupt and unresponsive to the needs of their constituents. To combat this, they advocated for the adoption of civil service systems, which would make hiring and promoting in city government more merit-based, and for the creation of independent agencies to oversee city functions such as utilities and transportation. Political machines. Progressive reformers also targeted political machines, which were powerful organizations that controlled local politics and used patronage to reward supporters. They sought to break the power of these machines by promoting direct democracy, such as through the use of the initiative, referendum, and recall, which allowed voters to propose and vote on legislation and to remove elected officials from office. Labor issues. Progressives were concerned about the treatment of workers in factories, mines, and other industries, and they sought to address issues such as low wages, long hours, and dangerous working conditions. They advocated for the regulation of business, the establishment of minimum wage laws, the creation of workers' compensation programs, and the right of workers to form unions. Social issues. Progressives also sought to address a range of social issues, including poverty, homelessness, and education. They supported the creation of public schools and the expansion of higher education, as well as the development of social welfare programs to help the poor and disadvantaged. Women's suffrage. Progressives were active supporters of the women's suffrage movement, which sought to secure the right to vote for women. They believed that women should have a greater role in politics and society and worked to promote their participation in civic life. Public health. Progressives also focused on public health issues, such as sanitation and disease prevention. They sought to improve living conditions in the cities by advocating for the construction of parks, playgrounds, and other recreational spaces, as well as for the creation of public health clinics and programs.